everyone! Now that I live in Sydney, I've had the chance to go shopping at a much wider variety of stores. I love it. But Matt doesn't feel exactly the same way. One thing I really enjoy is all the great deals. I'll wander around the stores and they are competing with how cheaply they can sell me designer coats and shiny shoes. In this way, it's clear that such discounting is a great way of driving competition. However, Matt has some other thoughts, so let's see what he has to say, and then we can discuss how this links back to shopping opportunities.
Thanks, Golnara. It might seem like I'm picking up on the competition point because I'm worried about all the shopping that's going on. But in truth, I'm picking up on it because I'm a pedantic nerd. Discounts based on some characteristic, be it time, age, sex, or income, can be of detriment to consumers as a whole. The reason for this is something we call price discrimination. To make sense of all of this, we have to think about what we mean with the term price discrimination. In economics, discrimination is a descriptive term. It isn't necessarily good or bad without some ethical judgments. What we are describing is that there are different prices being charged to different groups. So how does price discrimination work? Imagine you own the only coffee shop in town. In Sydney, this is quite relevant given that 90% of the cafes can't make a good coffee, but they can make some amazing food. How do you determine the price you set for coffee in that instance? Well, we can go over to our trusty demand curve. Here we have a demand curve for our beautiful coffee. As we head down this demand curve, a lower price is being set and more people are buying our coffees. This demand curve describes the behavior of those who demand coffee. Now, a lot of the time, people will only buy one, maybe two coffees during the day, getting the rest of their caffeine fix from the instant coffee at work. So let's imagine that each point on this demand curve is an individual, and each individual has a different willingness to pay for coffee. The demand curve represents this, as each individual point on the curve represents the willingness to pay of the individuals who would not have purchased coffee when the price was higher, but will start purchasing now, what we call the marginal consumer. Cool. So as a coffee producer, how do we maximize our profit? There are two ways to think this through. We could set a single price for all customers, or we could charge a bespoke price for every single customer that comes and buys coffee. Let's look at these two situations. In the first situation, we will want to understand the cost of making each coffee. There is a series of upfront fixed costs of setting up, but we're interested in the variable costs associated with deciding to make more coffee, the wage required to have staff working more, the coffee beans, the electricity for running the machines. These things combine to make what we call the marginal cost curve, where this curve represents the cost of making one additional unit of coffee. Now, we want to make all the coffees where the revenue for making such a golden beverage is greater than the cost. The first coffee, where we could charge someone the high price at the top of the demand curve, definitely offers more revenue than the cost. But what about the second coffee? Well, since we only have one price, we will have to cut the price for the first customer in order to sell to the second customer. So the extra revenue is equal to the price paid by the second customer minus the reduction in the price paid by the first customer. We can represent this process with a marginal revenue curve, and so select the point where marginal revenue, the additional revenue we get selling to that person, is equal to marginal cost, the additional cost for selling to that person. As a coffee maker, I will tend towards prices on the demand curve where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, generating this specific producer surplus. The producer's surplus minus those initial fixed costs and the opportunity cost of making coffees is then what we call profit, and this is the largest profit that I can make. Well, given that I can only set one price. What happens if customers walk up to us with their willingness to pay projected on their forehead, maybe tattooed even? And no one else can see it except us in the cafe, so no one knows how much other people pay or are willing to pay. then we can clearly maximize profit by charging each one of these beautiful people as much as they can bear to pay. This is called first-degree price discrimination. Here, every single person who values the product at more than the cost of the product receives it. As a result, a lot more coffees are sold, and people who missed out before now get a coffee. Nice. However, the benefit of this additional efficiency all goes to the cafe. And people who would have previously purchased coffee now have to pay more for the privilege. So the cafe wins, consumers who couldn't purchase before and now do are indifferent, and the prior customers are in a worse position. Now, firms love this situation, but overall we might see this as quite unfair given the loss experienced by consumers. If we value $1 to consumers more than $1 to firms, this may be seen as a fundamentally bad situation. Now, Gulnara, how do you think we could use this knowledge to explain the role of shopping discounts?
Thanks, Matt. So how can we use this framework to think about discounts? Here we can think about what happens if firms can't practically set many prices due to consumers' perceptions of fairness or due to a lack of information about willingness to pay. Then we may use some tag to determine willingness to pay. Do you have a student ID? Well, what do you know? I happen to know that students tend to have less income and are more willing to drink substitutes like Red Bull, so I'll offer you a lower price. You don't have a student ID. Well, you are more likely to be someone with income and a special dependence on coffee, so I'll offer you a higher price. How would I do this without annoying people? Well, I'd increase the base price of my coffee and then offer a student discount. Let's think about this by cutting our demand curve into two. Here we have a demand curve for students on the right and a demand curve for non-students on the left. Our marginal cost curve slices through both of them as it is a nice flat curve. As we can tell, we would want to charge a different price to these two due to the different shapes of the demand curve. The lower level of the student's curve and the fact that demand is more elastic, a flatter curve, push towards a lower price than the non-student's curve. Given this, we operationalize the different prices by having a student discount while charging a new, higher non-student price. This is called third-degree price discrimination and does not just occur in the face of discounts, but also through bargaining and other forms of differential pricing. In this instance, the firm wins and the customers also who pay a higher price lose. But there is another winner, the customers who get to pay a lower price. This includes two types of customers. Customers who would have purchased anyway but have the tag of low willingness to pay, and customers who would not have purchased at the prior price. In this way, the increased efficiency and lift in sales to those with a low willingness to pay may be quite positive things, while those with a high willingness to pay are bearing the burden of this. How we interpret this may be quite context-specific. For the firm, this does risk avoidance relative to the case where we can see their willingness to pay on top of their head. For example, a student might buy a coffee from their newly employed friends. As a result, the difficulty in actually seeing the true information limits how effective price discrimination can be. Given the importance of information, we can extend this to think about modern information collection and its use. Supermarkets love to collect customer-specific information on how responsive they are to sales, what their age, gender, and location are, and the frequency and magnitude of their shops. To work with this, supermarkets increasingly collect your sales information and offer you tailored individual discounts to reward you for being a good customer. This sounds great. The supermarket can tell what I want, reduce transaction costs by showing it to me, and they even sometimes offer me sweet discounts. Nice. But let's not forget the lesson of price discrimination. What would the price of items have been in the absence of this information collection? Supermarkets are not offering discounts from the bottom of their hearts. Instead, they are able to use individual specific discounts to price discriminate, having a higher base price for those who urgently need the product or that they have identified will not respond to sales, while cutting prices for those who are responsive to price changes.
That was great, thanks Scully. But there was one point missing: the importance of competition. Competition drives down producer surplus to zero due to other businesses entering the market. As a result, in our example of cafes, there's no incentive for price discrimination, as if you tried to charge a bit more to certain customers, they would just switch to an alternative cafe. In the supermarket case, the price discrimination only occurs when it is combined with anti-competitive actions, ways of locking consumers into a relationship with a specific firm that make it costly to adjust, for example, loyalty cards. With big data, there will be price discrimination and lock-in mechanics. As a result, does this mean that we should ban the collection and use of big data about consumers? No way. There is value in making it easier for consumers to access things they want, and if there are unavoidable competition issues due to market barriers or fundamental differences in product types, some degree of price discrimination can be generally good in certain circumstances. Instead, it is the degree of lock-in for consumers and the differential access to data between firms that are the issue, as they generate the competitive barriers that can lead to harmful price discrimination. The modern world is filled with price discrimination, and when this opens up the opportunity for people with lower incomes to access opportunities, this need not be a bad thing. Instead, the key lesson from this is that as businesses use information more and build up knowledge about their customer base, the negative consequences of competition issues can become more acute. And as a result, measures to increase product market competition become more important.